Hi, in this video I'm going to read to you the financial horror story called Nightmare on Wall Street, obviously based on Nightmare on Elm Street. It is covered in Swiss Frankenstein Financial Horror Stories on page 75. Nightmare on Wall Street. Sell, your position has become untenable. The dreaded words from the chairman of the Bank of Wall Street followed a series of events that he, the CEO of the second largest global custody bank of securities in the world, had effectively caused, or not prevented, or both. It had started with a call by Jim, his technology officer. He told him about a hack of his back office systems that was going to make securities trading grind to a halt around the world. Indescribable losses would result. What? Said Sal, half asleep as his wife Jennifer woke him up. Someone is calling. What a terrible time, can't it wait? I just had a terrible nightmare, Sal murmured as he reached out to the nightstand to grab his phone, happy to be woken up from it. What were you doing in the study, sleepwalking? In the study? Me? He looked at his phone. Jim, that can't be. Jim, what's going on? You know what time it is, right? Very sorry, Sal, but this can't wait. I received a message from an anonymous employee about an hour ago. According to the message, the securities we have in custody will not be settled. I'm not talking some securities, I'm talking all securities. This message said all securities will fail to settle. Trillions of dollars in stocks and shares held by the bank around the world will not be capable of being transferred. Markets will come to a grinding halt when markets open in a few hours. Sal listened in silence. Fuck. Is this for real? This is exactly my dream. Have I become clairvoyant? Sal, are you there? Yes, of course. Sorry, it's quite something you're saying. What makes you think that this threat is real? Any lunatic can send a message like that. Doesn't mean it is for real. How could this even be true? Sal looked at his wife and pressed mute for a moment. Am I awake? What kind of nightmare is this? Should I tell him about my nightmare? No, I can't. I will look ridiculous. What benefit would it have? He unmuted again. What exactly has happened? I received a message from a no-reply email address of ourselves that mentioned this would happen upon opening of the markets. Our systems would not listen or respond to instructions from any asset manager that is otherwise entitled to buy or sell securities or cash we have in custody. Sal was quiet for a moment and walked out of the room to his study and closed the door. As I said, how is that even possible? You can't just switch off our ability to take instructions from the entire planet. It's like the president presses the nuclear button. We are the world's second largest global custodian, Sal. We are holding almost 15% of the world's securities, over $50 trillion. That means we are a very important factor for geopolitics. If the president wants to freeze assets we hold, of a particular country or in general, he can effectively do so. Jim paused for a moment, then continued. What I'm trying to say is, some people have a red button, Sal. Special access to prevent securities from ending up in the wrong hands. Very senior people in our bank and in the government. About 1 hour ago, one of them may have used this red button. It could also be something else. At first sight, there appear to be numerous issues that could cause a global settlement issue, but it's hard to say what. As you know, our bank is a patchwork of IT systems of various banks and custodians we've taken over. It's been virtually impossible and far too expensive to replace these for something new, fresh, consistent and flawless. Sal said nothing for a moment and sat down at his desk. Of course, legacy systems would be the cause. Most global banks had grown through acquisitions and had the same issue. But why, of all banks on the planet, does it have to be us to bite the bullet? He touched his keyboard. The screen switched on. Strange, I normally shut down after using it. He unlocked it. Jennifer mentioned I was in his study. Was that an hour ago? What exactly do you mean by red button, Jim? I believe we discussed something like that during a meeting on emergency measures, but I'm not sure. Indeed, said Jim. I can't talk about it on the phone for security reasons, but yes, we have discussed it. We have no time to lose. What are the next steps? We have to call the emergency committee together immediately. I'll do it. Let's say half an hour in the boardroom. It was about 5 o'clock in the night when the emergency team sat together in the boardroom, some 3 hours before the markets would open and would be potentially unable to settle. Would break out in panic if there was no settlement, undoubtedly. Sal sat at the end of the table, on one side having his Chief Technology Officer Jim and Chief Operating Officer Melissa, on the other side his General Counsel Mark, and Lisa his Head of Communications. Guys, he said. Melissa and Lisa were part of the guys. In 3 hours, global markets may find out that our bank is unable to settle securities. You can only guess what happens in that case. Unless we do something in the next 3 hours, that is. Smart questions were asked. Whether the red button impact could be undone. If IT specialists could find out if that was indeed diagnosed as the issue. If the effect could be mitigated by issuing a press release downplaying the events to their impact. And more. There were no smart answers except undesirable answers. None of the persons present in the room knew a way to change the consequences. To keep the ability to settle the securities, Jim mentioned the system was built to be irreversible. This was the only part of the bank operational infrastructure where even he as Chief Operating Officer was not aware how it worked. The Secret Service had been involved on this as a matter of national security. This was not a matter for which he could call the President of the United States, though, to instruct the Secret Service. This feels like a millennium bug, said Melissa. The whole world expected massive IT issues around the world and worked on addressing it, but nobody knew if it would really cause problems. I hope we will have the same anticlimax ending, said Jim. Listen, the clock is ticking. We need to do something, said Mark. Shall we break out and come together in 15 minutes or so with ideas on how we can deal with this situation? Great suggestion, Mark, said Sal. 6 a.m. So, let's go work stream by work stream, said Sal. You go first, Jim and Melissa. Is there anything you have come up with to prevent or to limit the impact? The cause of this all sits in your domain, remember? Jim cleared his throat while Melissa was looking at him as if he was going to be shot in a minute. I'd love to say we have solutions. We've given every possible scenario some thought, but 2 hours is absurdly little time to even begin to look into the cause of the issue. Gone are the days that people deliver the bearer bond by handing over a document to someone else. The level of complexity in securities trading and settlement and an organization like ours is daunting. We can do a lot with minimal downtime of our systems, but it's likely we cannot solve the magnitude of this issue we're facing now. That is a disappointing answer. I was expecting to hear something more ambitious and creative than a simple no from people we're paying a fortune. Jim looked at him with a sheepish face. Communication, Lisa, what are we going to communicate? Sal said. And don't tell me you suggest to say nothing. No, we will not communicate. We will communicate, of course, Lisa said. My proposal is this. We cannot sugarcoat the consequences. What we can do is to be relatively open about it. Nobody will buy BS. And explain how this happened in a way that makes it clear it could have happened not just with us, but with any financial institution like us. Something like being struck by lightning, very rare but inevitable. The question will be how rare and inevitable this really is, I guess. But the approach sounds right. Can you work that out, please? Mark, we are probably facing the biggest legal storm we will ever face. What is the approach you suggest? That is probably inevitable for sure. I would suggest a number of ways to minimize and address that risk. I discussed with Lisa that part of communication strategy. The rare and inevitable part should be aimed at framing this as a force majeure event, which it probably is anyway. But it's an operational and IT issue to determine. He looked at Jim and Melissa. We must stay away from anything that makes it look as negligence, like IT or operational flaws, like human error, inadequate security measures, etc. Force majeure is something that does not trigger liability as per our terms and conditions. It is often acknowledged by courts like that. Besides, I will line up our law firms and deal with the storm of claims. We will follow this line of defense. Got it. That makes sense, Mark. Thanks, said Sal. Jim, Melissa, can you please follow this strategy and find whatever argument you can find to make this a force majeure event? As they nodded, Sal concluded that meeting and told everyone to go execute on this strategy immediately. He walked back to his office. In my dream, this exploded in our faces. Can't remember if the force majeure element played a role. Sounds like a nice try. How did they conclude that I was to be sacked over this? It wasn't just my CEO responsibility. There was something more I actually cocked up. But what? What was I doing in my study last night? I must have been working on a computer as it was on and it locked. I can't have done anything in my sleep. Press a red button. The press release had gone out about 30 minutes before the New York Stock Exchange opened. As expected, it went viral in no time. The emergency team did not quite appreciate the speed at which it went viral. The measurement and refreshing speed was much lower than the news traveled. Lisa had posted a press message online to preempt or at least reduce as many questions as possible. It did not work. Within minutes, all of their phones were ringing non-stop. Sal looked at his watch and to monitor that it showed a more hectic pre-opening NYSE. The time until NYSE opened seemed to last forever. Indeed, very similar to the Millennium Bug. Over $40 trillion worth of stocks and shares around the world would not be capable of being settled if the story was true as they presented it, about the gross domestic product of the USA and China combined. The opening of NYSE was surreal. CNN had published breaking news headlines under its news announcing global securities settlement failure, Bank of Wall Street expected. And other news picked up from Lisa's press release. The media attention focused on the global systemically important bank status of the bank that was holding over $50 trillion, a status that effectively meant it was too big to fail, too big to go bankrupt without pulling over much of the global financial system with it. If $50 trillion of value was paralyzed, unable to be transferred, that was a problem, a very big problem. Seconds after the New York Stock Exchange opened, a major settlement issue was reported almost immediately. The S&P 500 index fell by a historic 17% within 3 minutes. Trading was stopped after 4 minutes. It was the shortest trading day on the world's foremost stock exchange ever. In a matter of hours, unprecedented panic had spread around global financial markets. Afraid of whether their clients and counterparties would be able to meet financial obligations, banks and financial institutions stopped lending, restricted cash withdrawals from accounts, stopped financing trade flows. The entire global financial system was interconnected. Every individual, company and institution was directly or indirectly impacted by the Bank of Wall Street, but it was not exactly clear how and by how much. A financial giant has become ill and has caused a financial pandemic that spread across the globe almost instantly, as one newspaper put it. Sal, Jim, Melissa and Lisa and their teams experienced a surreal morning. Emails poured in from clients seeking clarity and access to their funds. Media seeking statements and information. Lawyers of counterparties sending notices of default and seeking immediate payment of obligations. The key message Lisa was trying to communicate, that this was a technical issue that impacted access to funds, not an issue of being insolvent or not having liquidity, got lost in the media storm, or simply did not impress. Bottom line was that the Bank of Wall Street was not capable of providing the most elementary services that impacted the entire planet, delivering stock, shares and money to those that bought or sold them. As soon as the next day, the Bank of Wall Street was put under special administration by the regulator. It did not help to resolve the technical issue that stood in the way of settlement of securities and funds. The operational reality of the plasterwork of IT systems, interfaces and factors behind the problem were simply too complex to solve quickly. And so it happened that Bank of Wall Street failed and collapsed as a result of what appeared to be mundane process flaws and IT issues, causing a chain of bank collapses and destruction of several $1 trillion in market value of securities. Millions of people lost large parts of their pensions savings. Even if they previously had a penny or penny stock, they got very wet during the many rainy days that followed. "So, your position has become untenable," said the chairman of Bank of Wall Street.